There is a tenderness to going inward. There's a tenderness to the process that happens when you close down the eyes and you get really still. Still enough that you're no longer engaging in distraction. Those things that keep you from experiencing what's actually here, for better or for worse. And it's interesting throughout this practice how much we are asked to hold paradox. We are asked regularly to contradict ourselves. And the complexity of that is what makes this exploration interesting. And it's what makes this exploration endless. There is no bottom here. There is no end to knowing yourself. There is no set list of boxes that you could check and reach the last one and be done. Because you are beautifully in evolution from the moment that you enter this earth as you are in this body to the moment that you leave this earth as you are in this body. And that body will change a lot in that span of time as well. And something that the philosophies of this practice want you to know is that you are not just your body. That even this word body from a yogic perspective includes mind, includes the energetics of the heart space, the mover of the gut. It includes your intuition, your intuitive power. It includes the thinking mind. It includes your emotional capacity. It includes all of these layers of you. And it understands that anything that you do for one piece, one part, one layer of your system will benefit the whole, will impact the whole. And anything that you do from you benefits or impacts the whole of the universe, the whole of the collective, the whole of the communities that you spend time navigating, spending time in. And humans are meaning-making creatures, so if we would like to go out into the world and live meaningful lives, we have to make that meaning from the ground up with our hearts, with our hands. And that engaging with our lives in that way, some people call it work. And from some perspective, it is. But also it's the type of work that puts your heart on fire in the best possible way. That leans you into living and loving and experiencing every drip, every drop that you get to experience of this humanness until you don't anymore, because someday you won't. And that is a fundamental thread that the philosophies want you to know, is that someday you won't live in this body anymore. And can we let the knowing of that light the fire underneath us, be the fuel to launch us into our lives in a way that is meaningful? In a way that when we reach the finish line, which is a totally unknown moment for each of us, that we could look back with gratitude, with a smile, with a fulfillment, with a yes. And so I ask you to check in this particular moment, knowing that it's always in flux, but in this particular moment, check in with your heart, check in with your gut. And if we could, just for a brief moment in time, turn down the volume knob on the chatter of the logical thinking mind. Not that we ever want to turn it off completely, or maybe we don't want to turn it off completely for too long, but if you imagine maybe all the pieces and parts of you sitting around a table and having a conversation, is there a piece or a part of you that speaks overpowers the others, that doesn't make room for the others to speak? Oftentimes, for many of us, that piece or part of you that gets a little louder is that of the thinking mind. So can we turn down the volume or create a little space to hear from the other pieces, the other parts, the heart, the emotional body, the gut, your intuition? Ram Dass says that it is through the intuitive heart that we get fed by the universe. And that when we're too much in our thinking minds, we end up feeling starved because we've cut ourselves off from the thing that feeds us. So again, if you can go into that inner space and check in this exact particular moment, what is going on in the landscape of your heart? What is present here? How are you feeling? And that might be in this exact particular moment type of thing. It could be in this week, this month, this season type of thing. Or it could be in this chapter of life that you're in. What are you navigating in the landscape of your life? Because one thing that I know when I look around at people is that we're all navigating something. Always. Joys, sorrows, celebrations, grief. That it's all a part of the landscape, and that it all is always happening simultaneously. But in different moments, certain energies are a little louder, a little more present, take up a little bit more space than the others. I think it's really real that in any particular moment in time, we can ask ourselves, what are you celebrating right now? And what are you grieving right now? Because if we're living in a present way, every single moment is both a celebration of what was, also a clearing of it. A clearing to make space for what is here now. And a launching pad for what is coming next. And that all these things are happening simultaneously, all day, every day. A celebration of what was. Also clearing it away, making space for what is here. And knowing that what is here is the foundation, the launching pad of what is to come next. That the decisions you make, the actions you take, or the inaction now, here, is always going to influence the next moment. And sometimes what the practice wants for us, and this is a fundamental kind of root of meditation, what the practice wants for us is to create more spaces in between. We call it the madhya, the gap space. To create more space in between, knowing that madhya, the gap space, the space between, is the space between stimulus and response. So another way of saying that, it's the space between what happens and how you react to it. And that in that space lies our power to make literally any choice. And when we expand that space, we expand our capacity to be with what is here and to move through the world in a way that is intelligent, that is intentional, that is intuitive, that is honoring the voices of the logic, of the mind, the lover of the heart, the mover, the intuit of the gut. So as you take a little scan of your internal system, you look into those places within you that only you could ever possibly touch. That intimacy that you have in your own heart space. We get to settle into that inner stillness that is available to us. But sometimes we forget that. We forget that stillness is here when we're moving through the chaos of the world. And when we're whirling in our chitta vrittis, the whirlings of the mind. We forget that just like the surface of the water might be turbulent, that there is always a depth beneath it that we can suspend ourselves into. And that imagery in itself might even be helpful. Can you imagine the turbulence of the surface of the water being that of our thoughts? But that just below it, there is a place that is accessible to us if we're willing to slip into it, that is still, that is quiet. And that knows in any moment that everything is beautifully perfect as it is. That really there's nothing to change here. There's nothing to do. That you don't have to be more or better or attain anything to know peace, to know love. The work of this practice is to know that, to play peekaboo with it, and to slowly over time start to expand the space, the amount of time that we spend in the knowing of it. And the reality is that as humans with thinking minds, we move in and out of the knowing. That is a part of the process. You can probably think of a moment in time in your life, something that you were learning where you had the aha moment, the light bulb flickered on, and then you lost it again. And then you reconnect, and the light turns on, and then you lose it again. And that is the game of peekaboo, or sometimes I think of it as almost like a game of whack-a-mole. We continue to move in and out of the knowing, and when the knowing is here, we bookmark it, we study it, so that we can start to extend and expand the amount of time that we spend in that space where we know on a fundamental level, on a heart level, on a gut level, where we know, not just know in the mind, but know in the whole system, that everything is beautifully perfect as it is. And that doesn't mean that we can't set our goals and we can't grow into new space, because that is also the flow of life. But it means that desire to attain isn't the thing that's driving you, isn't the thing that is setting your worth, your value. And our successes can become the cherry on top of a life well lived. And that the richest thing we can do for ourselves is to cultivate eyes that see the world through a lens of gratitude for what's here, acceptance that everything that's here is gonna go, because that's how it works. And because we know it's temporary, that is exactly what makes it sacred. And when we cultivate that way of looking at the world, that everything becomes beautiful right in front of our eyes. Thank you for showing up and doing that work. It's an honor to share in the practice together.